That button got hit. All right, are you guys hearing me now? That was a good thing to figure out right away. All right, we're going to dive in. We got lots to go over. So we're going to keep moving. We've got an audience online, and Lynn is a good friend of mine who's running the machine, and she'll might raise her hand and ask questions. You guys are also welcome to ask questions. Tonight is, so we use a model, we use a couple models, DNAV and DBT in our program. And and decide. And so tonight is titled Listen, but it's listening to your and so we're going into that. But first off, you did ask about here's our program. Here's a huge need. We're getting a lot of additional slots on October 4th. If anybody is looking to get their young person in sooner than later. And this
Paula,
is the
you need
range
to
of the
mute
things
yourself.
we think that we've shown we can work on. So last time, last we talked about, which is where do you fit on these extremes, and how do you try in some of these really challenging areas of being too lenient or being too strict, making light of problem behaviors, holding on too tight or forcing independence too soon. We went over typical versus cause of concern for behaviors, defense mechanisms, validation versus invalidation, family trust banking, and then how important conversations that need to be going on about life issues and choosing values. So if you've missed that one, that kind of if you're looking to hear some of those things, that one will help you on that. So tonight, regulation domains that are skills that young people have to get successful at. Tonight and for the next 2 episodes, we're going to cover those regulation skills in some part. Cognitive regulation and family conflict and emotion regulation, form distress in young people. Then we're going to go through the distress tolerance and how. One more reminder, if you're at home and you have a balloon, use it for an experience. You came in? Great. On October 6th, we're going to talk about self-regulation and behavioral regulation and value clarification, which helps with the whole motivation problem. And then the last episode will be on Decide, but looking at relationships, dealing with ongoing pain, and then learning how to build change plans for your family. Just a review of learned fun fact recently that what the whole world was, or be literally on the map when they didn't know what that area. Dragons, sea monsters, and other mythical creatures. About dragons tonight, just dragon. I want to start with a fun. Sure. I have a degree in clinical psychology, not in tech. In any way. Light there. Lynn, push that thing in and then push the connection to the computer in. Yeah, and the actual, that's the receiver. It looks like it's okay. I'm going to keep going and apologize. We thought we had this down. So, I'm going to share a story with you. No such thing as a dragon. I brought my story. I'm too tall when I get up on the stool, but I brought my storytelling stool because really, a campfire, which is really where I like to tell stories, right? So, Billy, when he woke up one morning and found a dragon in his room, it was a small dragon, about the size of a kitten. The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted its head. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother, "There's no such thing." And she said it like she meant it. And began to dress. The dragon came close to Billy and wagged its tail, but Billy didn't pat it. If there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on the head. Billy washed his face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. Ken already said there's no such thing as a dragon. There's no such thing. You can't tell it to get down off the table. Mother made some pancakes for Billy, but the dragon ate them all. Mother made some more, but the dragon ate those too. Mother kept making pancakes until she ran out of batter. Billy only got one of them, but he said that was all he really wanted anyway. Billy went upstairs to brush his teeth. Mother started clearing the table. The dragon, who was quite as big as Mother by this time, made himself comfortable on the hall rug and went to sleep. By the time Billy came back downstairs, the dragon had grown so much he filled the hall. Billy had to go around by way of the living room to get where his mother was. "I didn't know dragons grew so fast," said Billy. "There's no such thing." "Dragon," said Mother firmly. Cleaning the downstairs took Mother all morning, what with the dragon in the way, and having to climb in and out of windows to get from room to room. By noon, the dragon filled the house. And there wasn't a room in the house that didn't have some part of the dragon in it. I'm hoping you're kind of thinking about what the dragon is in your house right now and what behaviors you're seeing that are kind of taken over. Awoke from his nap, he was hungry. A bakery truck went by. The smell of fresh bread was more than the dragon could resist. The dragon ran down the street after the bakery truck. The house went along, of course, like the shell on a snail. The mailman was just coming up the path with some mail for the Bixbys when the house rushed past him and headed down the street. He chased the Bixby's house for a few blocks, but he couldn't catch it. When Mr. Bixby came home for lunch, the first thing he noticed was that the house was gone. Luckily, one of the neighbors was able to tell him it went. Mr. Bixby got in his car and went looking for the house. He studied all of the houses as he drove along. Finally, he saw the one that looked familiar. Billy and Mrs. Bixby were waving from an upstairs window. Mr. Bixby climbed over the dragon's head, onto the porch roof, and through the upstairs window. Mr. Bixby asked. "It was the dragon," said Billy. "There's no such thing," Mother started to say. "There is a dragon," Billy insisted. "A very big dragon." And Billy patted the dragon on the head. It wagged its tail happily. Then, even faster than it had grown, the dragon started getting smaller. Soon, it was kitten size. "I don't mind the dragon," said Mother. "Why did it have to grow so big?" "I'm not sure," said Billy, "but I think it just wanted to be noticed." So you guys will turn And hopefully those of you that are joining us from home have downloaded the packet. And on page 1, you can take notes, you can think about it. But what dragon life of your family? More young since COVID started with families that were divorced than how do we raise dragons? Note. And last week we talked about defense mechanisms. You know, these look differently from, you know, my 3. That's her personal dragon at the moment as she figures out how to tell the truth. And as they get bigger, those get more dramatic. I keep talking about those as we go. And so one of the models, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy in our program, has this as one of their major components. And it's the 3 stages. You know, and our goal with DBT skills is to have a young person make the majority of their decisions in wise mind, and understanding that they have this rational part of them, or other people around them have rational parts that just say, hey, I really just want to get things done. Decisions based on what intellectually makes sense. This is kind of a meta or Big Bang Theory. They think logically, they focus on facts, compares current experiences to past experiences, and it ends up suppressing or just flat out trying to ignore emotions. All right, so some rational mind is they're just trying to say they feel anything. They're not. It doesn't matter. They're just trying to get things done. So the opposite of that is the emotional mind. Decisions are based on, you know, what feels good. It is getting so hard these days to be able to track facts. We got fake news on top of everything else, but then there's just so much information, right? My favorite example that I've heard is go into, you know, some kind of Walmart and try and decide on a shampoo and a conditioner. You got 50 plus choices. How do you use rationality or facts to make a decision based on that? So you kind of go, you know, I mean, in my case, I'm literally using the same shampoo and conditioner that my hair person, and she's a good friend, told me when I was 20. This is what you should use. Luckily, I can still think about it. Emotional mind thinks and focuses on emotions a lot. It's reactive and or defensive, hence the defense mechanisms. And it's often opposed to rational mind. So if somebody is an emotional mind, logic just doesn't make sense. All right. I also want to share, these are not good. It has really strong benefits to it. So I've learned recently, I would have, you know, a couple years ago told you I was very rational minded, but I've learned I'm very, very emotionally minded because I grew up ADHD and have really sensitive skin. But I use so many strategies and techniques, I kind of pushed myself to the rational side and literally can look back and for about 6-8 years suppress and ignore. All right. And so I default to rational when I get stressed. So that's where I go when I get stressed, all right? And when I'm in a crisis situation, my ability to suppress my emotions is amazing. I can triage and people can be hurt. I can know what to do. I can stop, I can be calm, and I can move things along. So it's also useful as a counselor. A kid anybody can say almost anything to me, and you're not going to get like an emotional shock wave. I'm just going to hear it, except it's helpful as a counselor, right? So it has its, when I get running around, what rational minded looks like is really wanting to take control of the situation. You're in timeout, you're in timeout, you're in timeout. You know, and I ignore that. I love these kids, you know, most of the time. So I ignore that emotional side. On the other hand, emotion mind can sound and look like slamming doors and yelling and crying and just like really super highs and lows. But without emotional mind, we don't get Twitter pated. We don't fall in love. We don't just fall in love with newborn babies. Really, they need that to happen. And so that's part of the emotional mind. So our goal is not to say either one of those is not a good idea, but it's to continue opening this window of tolerance around the wise mind decision making. And wise mind decisions are, you know, kind of finding a balance there, but it's recognizing, hey, I feel like doing this, or I don't feel like doing this. Let's say we got a huge stack of homework, all right? Emotion mind says, I'm overwhelmed, I don't want to do this. Rational, my parents or parents say, you're going to fail this class, you're going to fail high school, you're not going to get a career, just do it. Like that's Nike's statement is like, they do it very emotionally, but it's the ultimate rational statement. Just do it. So wise mind, okay, it's overwhelming me, and I know I need to get it done. So maybe what I can do is set a timer and pick one assignment and do 15 minutes, and then take a break and do something I like to do, and then go back and forth as I'm able. All right. There are other wise mind decisions, but it's honoring and nurturing both sides of who we are. Is that making sense to everybody? Because this is a tool right off the bat, having a conversation with your young person, just be like, this is what I look like in rational mind, and this is a conversation. This is what I look like in emotional mind, and this is what I look like in wise mind. And then have them share the same. And then I would not do it in the heat of an argument, but looking back, and it's a really good question, I use it a lot in group, is can you look back at some decision that you made in emotional mind, and would you make a different decision if you had been in wise or rational mind? So right away, this is a really strong tool, and it's strong. Literally, our young people, what state of mind and are they in, and are they learning and using the other tools we talk about to shift themselves into a wise mind place and make wise mind decisions. So left you some notes. I just want to throw that tool right out there to you. It's a pretty simple one to use. Going back to the story, the mom started from a very, very rational minded position. Does that kind of make sense after we've talked about these? There are no such thing, or there's no such thing as a dragon. All right? That's a very rational statement. Interestingly enough, it became very emotional in actions as she went out windows and, you know, and tried to do these things around this big dragon that was in her way. But until we got to, until the dragon was finally noticed and acknowledged, and the whole family shifted into a kind of a wise mind place, both acknowledging, because it's not like the dragon just went away. And if we're going to say the dragon is anxiety or depression or addictions or something like that, you know, it doesn't mean we can turn them off or just have them go away. It just means we learn to live with it, we accept it, and we figure out what the best pathway forward from that point on is. So we'll kind of keep referring back to just a sec. So here be dragons. I want to, in the DNA AV valuer last week, we talked about the advisor. We're going to hit more. Discoverer is about looking at what we're doing, what we have been doing, trying new things, seeing if they work out, like actually testing them, seeing what we're really capable of, growing, getting stronger all the time. All right, so I want to share a video with you that both explains kind of what the Discover is and why it's a challenge to a young person who's already struggling in some way, shape, or form. Oh, he's got like some red tents. Oh.
Good morning, John. I'd like to make a quick comment. Two postulates followed by a conclusion. Postulate 1, creating is terrible. Postulate 2, I think it creates. That everyone. Creating is terrible. It's sharing the creation, or even the thought of sharing the creation is terrible. Because once your creation is about another person, you have lost time. You've got a situation maximum amount of power for this thing to have made, to know how you you have all your hopes and dreams and values and aspirations, days or weeks or months or years of work that you poured into this thing that you're now sharing with the world, and the world has every right to decide. So yeah, terrifying, right? Now on the second postulate, that all people are creators.
What? This thing?
That's not how important it is. Even if you have no way of physically creating it. Hate it when people give the advice to just be yourself, because like, who is that? We create ourselves. You make you out of books that you read. The bare minimum of creation. You cannot try very hard. You can be really bland. You can just create really bland things that look like everything else that everyone else has ever created, or you can create things that you don't care about at all, or for people who you don't care about, or you can just never ever share the things that you create. And of course, all of these strategies are terrible ways to live. It's terrible to see people doing this with their creations. But the most terrible creation to see people do this with is their self. Trying to be boring, trying to look like everyone else, or worse, not trying at all, which has led me to the belief that you know, as a creator, how worthwhile your creation is by how terrifying you are. I'm only to find one solution to this, which is just to create in spite of fear, and to create constantly, to create for children and adults and your parents and your idols and your peers and your community, and to consciously be creating yourself every day to make you the you that you feel best inside, and create friendships, because I honestly believe that friends are the commodity by which we should all be judged. It's the only way that I've found to temper the fear of creation, just to create constantly. Because to be clear, the fear doesn't go, you just get more comfortable in it. John, I'll see you on Tuesday.
All right, so we're having some technical difficulty around the video and the audio. But the slides should continue to work, and we're going to be talking about them. So we'll keep moving. We will send out the video to everybody that signed up. So sorry about that. Hopefully that cleared up the audio problem. Other technical issues. So if you pay attention to that, you know, he's given us the ways that young people kind of control their being in some way, shape, or form. And the things he covered were, you can create the bare minimum. So just don't do much at all. You can be bland. All right, so create things that look like everybody else, what everybody else has created. So if they did it, it must be okay, so I'll do the same thing. Create things you don't care about or for people you don't care about. You know, so when a young person's really significantly using sarcasm or something like that, that's them trying to detach themselves from their creation and act like nothing matters to them, kind of thing. You can never share it. I know a lot of young people who in their bedroom are creating, masterpieces or playing music and other things, and it just won't go anywhere because we're not going to risk even that option of it showing up for other people. Create all the time, and that would be his suggestion, is like, and that really follows. So it's really bizarre, but how you get over a phobia, and you get a phobia by, like, when you're young or something happens and you're like afraid of snakes, and you ran into snakes and they scared you, and it led to a phobia. The way you get over a phobia is literally willingly exposing yourself to snakes in little doses and working your way up. Does that make sense? And so in this case, creating all the time is literally testing and pushing that boundary to see what you're capable of. And that's why it's a discover kind of thing. I will say, from the young people I work with, there are a couple other ways of being that they exhibit. The first one is kind of creating chaos, is about the best way I could categorize it. But the self-harming, trying to control all their eating, their intake, their outtake, self-medication, so drugs and alcohol, extreme exercise, their defense mechanisms. When I say it's chaos, because and create is not like, these are not all purposeful things. I'm not saying these are conscious decisions, but it interferes with the family life, just like that dragon does, all right? And so having to go to appointments or trying to figure out if the self-harm actually means they're suicidal, these things are creating more chaos that get in the way of other things in their lives happening. And then finally, there's the final answer of just stop creating altogether, which is suicide in that case. Does that concept make sense to everybody? Any questions, or, our hope is that and when we talk about building growth ladders in a couple of episodes, we're going to be talking about how do we start putting things back into their lives, as the case may be. So I want to share, kind of putting this together, what it might look like, and we're going to move into talking a little bit about the advisor, but this is Bries Dragon, all right? And this is from Thriving Adolescence, which is the DNAV model. Don't leave your bag in the hall, Bries' mom yells. Then, as Brie walks past her mom without saying a word, her mom says, "Don't you ignore me." Brie rushes into her room and slams the door. "Why are you so negative all the time?" her mother yells through the door. "This is the best time of your life. Just wait until you grow up. It's not going to get any easier." Brie, I can't stand it anymore, Brie thinks. Nobody gets me. Nobody likes me. Brie sits on her bed with her precious possessions surrounding her, journal on her desk, her art posters, and her yellow laptop and cell phone. Other things are hidden behind the secret door cut into the ceiling of her closet. A bottle of wine, some pot, and her cutting implements. Brie thinks about how stupid her parents are for not knowing that she steals their wine. Then she thinks over her day. I've been going to the same stupid school for 4 years, and today was the worst day ever. It was so boring, I felt like cutting myself just to block out the boredom. My friends talked about the usual stuff, boys and moronic boy bands. My teacher talked in boring voices about boring stuff. Mr. Woods made us copy paragraph after paragraph from his PowerPoint slides. Ms. Campbell showed a 50-minute video that was at least 30 years old. Mr. Wilson told me to grow up because I was drawing instead of paying attention to a stupid class. I can't stand it anymore. None of them understand me. None of them care about what I want, what I feel, and what I think. So right there, we've got a young person who has values and things that matter, but they don't fit into whatever is going on in her life, and she can't make those connections. Then Brie picks up her notebook and starts writing. My pain is alive. My soul aches. Nothing helps. I have nowhere to go. I've tried everything to control my feelings, but nothing works. If I lose control, I might actually go too far. That scares me and makes my head hurt too. So I'm going to keep cutting deeper and deeper. I can't stand it. I don't intend to kill myself. At least I don't think I do. Bree throws her journal across the room, then almost automatically, she extracts the blade from her secret place, sits down on her bed, and slowly cuts her upper thigh. The cutting feels otherworldly, like someone else is doing it. She watches as the blood runs down her leg. She had felt like screaming at her mom just seconds ago, but now she feels nothing. So in this case, it's really hard to even grasp what, and last week I talked a lot about environmental factors or, social factors. There's nothing you can point to in this young lady's life that would directly connect to the pain she's showing. And so I want to do another experiment with you guys, and hopefully you can hear this online. So to maybe have a better understanding of this. In this experiment, I'm going to say a few sentences. After you hear each sentence, simply think about what I said, and then notice what your advisor, okay, so what does your inner voice do with whatever statement I happen to say? There's no right or wrong here. Just notice what shows up when you listen to what I say. It might be best to close your eyes so you can concentrate. Ready? I am weird. Remember, just notice what the advisor, what that inner voice says. I am brilliant. I am perfect. I am broken. I am stupid. I am ugly. I am beautiful. All right, so a little bit of a show of hands. Did your inner voice try to evaluate any of those sentences or apply them to yourself? Lynn's did. Did it make it even more dramatic or, use stronger words like bullshit or something else like that? Just think about it. Did anybody apply them to themselves, any of the statements to themselves? No? Lynn did, back here. I will tell you, most of the young people I work with do apply them to themselves. Now, here's the most interesting aspect of this experiment. Do you remember my instructions? I asked you to listen to some sentences I was going to say, and your job was to just notice what your advisor did with them. I never once mentioned that they were about you. In fact, they were about me. I was saying I am weird, not you. So in this case, it's interesting. We're just sitting here, I say some statements, and ask you to notice what happens, which really shouldn't be an emotional or reactive process. Then your advisor goes into overdrive, and all of this other stuff comes up. All right, I will tell you that most of the young people apply these to themselves, and very, very rarely are they applying it in positive ways. Like they're just finding the negative kind of point. They're hearing things. And if you applied any of them, you can imagine they're getting input from the media, they're getting input from their friends, or they're just hearing things said around them. So a fight that's around them or something, and then they're applying it to themselves. And this advisor, and we talked about this last week, it just rotates that thought just rotates in and out of their mind. So you think about somebody like Brie, and she's just, these negative thoughts have gotten in there, and her advisor is getting and moving towards that self-abusive kind of thing. Hit on some of this last week, but the advisor's that inner voice. You're trying to avoid engaging in trial and error, so you want to know the right answer. You really think there's a right answer, and you're moving in that. So you're creating rules, and then you're following these rules on your own. And regularly, that's an okay thing. I mean, it's not a horrible thing. We could not navigate a very complex world without having some kind of set of rules. It has some really positive things. Again, promotes high-speed evolution, promotes fast and efficient functioning. Like you take that to the extreme, and you've got the stories you heard about Zuckerberg, or you saw Steve Jobs. Like literally, they only have one kind of shirt and one kind of pants. They don't even think about it in the morning, right? They're just as efficient as possible. This is the rule. This is what I do. It can also, but it can make those rules really rigid. Like I have to do this. The extreme case of that is an OCD where I have to do some kind of ritual or something like that. But I'm following rigid rules. It absorbs others' unhelpful thoughts. All right. I may never once have thought about cutting, but then I ran into somebody who was cutting, or I saw an article online about somebody cutting. And I'm like, well, let's try that, because what I'm doing right now doesn't feel like it's working. It can become detextualized and can distort incoming information. So it really ends up taking somebody like Brie and not letting her see that her life is actually reasonable, and she's got it. There's nothing for her that she thinks she can be grateful for. There we go. Unskilled, and so this is cognitive regulation, this advisor. It influences cognitive regulation, which is your mindset, self-criticism, mind reading of others, whether you're willing to take responsibility, because responsibility means you're responsible for it. And if you're afraid of doing that, afraid of creating things, or you're going to beat yourself up because you do it, you don't want to take on responsibility. Looks like non-dialectical thinking, so black and white, polarized, or perspective taking. And then sometimes you want your young person to not start the conflict or find a way to resolve it. If they don't have good cognitive regulation, they can't even think of another path other than conflict. Invalidation of themselves, difficulty influencing others and their own behaviors. So if they're stuck in this thinking, it literally means they have a harder time getting what they want most of the time, which just then feeds in as a fact, oh, the world is against me. I don't have the skills to navigate and get to that point, and so now the world must be against me because this is what I want and I can't get it, so it must be unfair. Somebody that's working on this or is skilled at it looks like the ability to make constructive and respectful choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on maybe ethical standards, safety concerns, and social norms. Dispositions to reliably meet commitments, so they actually mean it when they say they will show up. They fulfill obligations, homework, showing up for work, and take on challenging roles. Abilities to plan, strategize, and implement complex tasks along with the realistic evaluation of consequences. All right, and they can take on the perspective of others and think about win-win kind of responses. So when you think about where is your young person in that spectrum, and what are we actually trying to move them for as far as their advisor or cognitive regulation? These are the things you're trying to move them towards. And so we have, so every time, that was Brie was a made-up example from the people who wrote the book and hundreds. This is just somebody that was in our room. I didn't even cherry pick these. I have ones that will scare you a little bit more. I have 150 to 200 of these letters to their advisor, because we have the young people do it every time they go through the program. So this is one of them. So dear advisor, you are never necessarily helpful to me. One moment you're telling me I'm wonderful, and the next you're calling me ugly and effing worthless and unlovable. You'll tell me that no one wants to be around me and you make me insecure. I effing hate you. You're ruining my life and making me choose to make decisions and ruin good relationships. Throughout my whole life, you tricked me into thinking I'm loved, cared for, and worth being here, just to stab me in the back and tear me down piece by piece. You love to tell me how effing sensitive, dingy, and annoying I am, and how much of a bother I am to anyone and everyone. You need to effing shut the hell up and change your attitude. Be more caring and stop making me feel like a piece of shit. Tell me I'm beautiful and unique and important, smart and kind, without turning around and saying the opposite. Make me feel loved. I would just tell you, this advisor becoming self-abusive is not, it's not a clinical thing even. They've done experiments where they just have your average classroom of high schoolers, and they ask them to think of their most critical thoughts and what that advisor is doing. And it is incredible how challenging just your average young person's advisor mind is. If they are, and I would say it even goes up to those that look like on the outside, they're hugely successful. Some of the saddest stories I've heard in the last couple of years are the young people that get a 4.0 and looked amazing in high school and just seemed to just skim by all of that, and then they got to college and like, oh my gosh, I'm not able to handle this, and I am beating myself up, and I don't know how to handle the complexity of this. And they come home, and like then they finally relax because they've just been amped up the whole time, not feeling like they could do it. And then they go back and they hit that pain and they don't see a way through it, and that's when they attempt suicide. And I've heard of more than I should have heard of with the people I hang out with, about that going on a regular basis. So this advisor becoming negative is a big deal, all right? And so this is the cognitive regulation part. It's the observing your thoughts and emotions, all right? So what we're hoping to teach young people is, can I notice these thoughts and unhook from them? And I was really impressed. This woman back here like didn't apply those things I was saying. She has learned to unhook from your advisor, you know, and that's something as adults we hopefully get to that point, even though we can't do it all the time. So one way to do that is diffusion. All right, and diffusion in the chemical world is that you have a high volume of concentration of something, like you throw a dot of coloring into water, and then it goes whoosh, and it spreads out through the whole thing. So you have a very low concentration at the end, all right? And so in cognitive diffusion, the purpose is to see thoughts as what they are, not as what they say they are, and this is by unhooking from your advisor. You expand your attention to thinking and experiencing as an ongoing process, not a causal, I need to change that, ontological, but it just means I believe that this thought is me, all right? If I can separate that and just say this is a thought popping into my head, that's a way to expand your thinking. And then to recognize everyone is doing this. At some point the young people have like 30 people in their class. And so I just at some point wanted to be like, how many in any of your average classes do you think are struggling with the same stuff you are? And I was expecting, 4 or 5, or that maybe they didn't know. They're like, everybody is. Like the young people these days just know that their friends are all struggling with the same stuff. So, but sometimes that helps them normalize. When to use? When private events are functioning as barriers due to fear. Fusion, evaluation. So fusion is literally like that black and white thinking. When you're evaluating everything, judging everything, you're starting to avoid things and reason. So how would you go about doing this? All right. Remember, we want to take the heaviness out of intrusive advisor statements. So one of the things we do in group is they write down this really negative phrase about themselves or something that they believe, and then we decorate it and celebrate it. So they make a poster out of it. All right, and so it's a struggling thought, but we diffuse it a little bit. And you say, thank you, mind. Hello, anxiety, depression, perfectionism. A big one is, I notice I'm having the thought or feeling, yada, 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 that I'm not good enough. Say your thought in a silly voice. So use that crotchety man voice. Is this thought or a fact? Is this a helpful thought? Name the story this fits into. Oh, that's a I never fit in story. I'm a worthless story. So acting like it's a story or fiction instead of who you are. What would my best friend say if they had this thought or feeling about me? All right, name your advisor. That's really entertaining, I will tell you, from young people. The names that they come up with. Shut up, advisor. Say no thanks. Say the thought 100 times. Draw your advisor, make it look silly. Ask, is my advisor being helpful or unhelpful right now? What mood is my advisor in? So in this case, some of you may be seeing a young person who gets stuck on something or has a phrase that they come up with regularly, or they don't think they're good enough. Can you help them diffuse or weaken that thought? It's a good place. I'm going to shift into noticer a little bit. Is there any questions at this point? Not sure we have anybody left online after all this.
No, we do.
Yes. I would just say I'm noticing that I'm thinking. All right, so like I don't know, you're about ready to do some homework, and you know, I just watched this with my daughter who doesn't like math. She's much more of a creative mindset, doesn't like math, and then doesn't think she can do it, all right? And she like skipped assignments. So I finally said, I mean, and I slipped into rational mind. It wasn't a fun interaction per se, but we sat down and had her look at the problem, and she'd already done the problem that she was stuck on correctly. Like the answer was right on her page. And so in that case, it would be like, you know, A, explaining that, but then notice that you are thinking, can't do this. And at that point, and so I would say that's the easiest one, just I notice it, so then I can decide whether that's something that I want to be true or not be true. You know, because you also want to notice the other side. Oh, I just had a really good interaction with those people. I want to do that again. But noticing it still works in both those situations. Does that make sense? But which one do you want to go in that direction? So that would be the one. That's a great question. Any others? Okay. I want you to get your balloon out now. We're going to do our little balloon experiment. And, bad job. So I'm going to say some statements. And what I want you to do is if I say a statement, I want you to, before I go there, in your packet on page 1, there's a space down there to say, what critical thoughts do you have about yourself? All right? I will say the easiest way to teach and help somebody else grow in something is to actually practice it and do it yourself. So if you can sit here and say, I have these 3 critical thoughts about myself, and how could I diffuse those? Maybe just by noticing or whatever. It's going to make it much easier to share that experience with your young person. I am going to skip the balloon experiment for today and come back to it next time or in the future. It's a fun one, but really the point is, are you a stuffer of your emotions or are you a sticker? All right, so if you're stuffing your emotions, and again, you'll find DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, they look at everything through this lens of this extreme versus this extreme. And those extremes are regularly damaging in some way, shape, or form. Or they're both good, but you have to have both of them in balance. So stuffing your emotions is, you know, like ignoring it, shoving it down, putting that rational mind on something, just saying, I'm going to ignore that and I'm going to push on. The challenge to stuffing is, do any of you have compost piles? Know what a compost pile is? You literally kind of just throw garbage on this pile, all right? And then you come back later and it's not like you really want to smell that pile or re-interact with any of those foods because it stinks, it's a mess. If you're shoving emotions down and not feeling them, I would argue that they start forming this kind of black pit of despair inside. Like they don't stay separate. Well, that was sadness and that's over here. And that was anger and they just start mixing together and become really negative. And they shift a young person towards that hopelessness kind of mindset that comes out of this. And so they're stuffing these emotions down. Now the opposite of that is, do I replay every emotion? Do I say, oh, she didn't like me. We had this bad interaction, she didn't like me, and so I'm going to spend the rest of my day replaying that interaction in my head and having that emotion over and over. So you never let go of it. You just keep feeling it. So I would argue at times I'm a stuffer and a sticker. But in like relationship with my wife, what I will do is like I just replay whatever made me mad or annoyed me. And I will actually look like I'm flighting for a little while, like I'm going away for a bit, but really I'm not flighting. What I'm doing is preparing my attack coming back. And I'm replaying this stuff and I'm making it a bigger deal all the time. So when I attack, like at times she doesn't even know
what I'm angry about, because it could have been 2 days ago, or things that had happened over 6 months that I've just kept sticking on, and then they all explode out. And that's the deal with either stuffing or sticking, is that incredibly enough, neither of them is a long-term solution. If you stuff them down, they're going to come out sideways. So this is the young person who, well, there's the fun, I don't know how funny it is, but there's the joke about the boss who goes out, plays around a horrible round of golf. So he's mad, or they're mad and angry. They come to the office and they yell for zero reason at their, at the person at the desk and who's trying to help them out and keep them track. Well, that person then gets angry and upset because they don't really know why, but they're getting treated badly. They go home and they treat their child really, really badly. And then this kid gets upset, and incredibly enough, he like kicks the cat. All right? Well, why is he upset and angry? Because somebody else had a bad golf game and then passed it on down. All right? So that's kind of the stuffing and sticking kind of thing. So feel your feelings is, can I actually let a feeling flow through me? Can I recognize what I'm feeling? Can I describe it? Can I label it? And those are ways you improve this, is actually being able to give emotions labels and describe them and put them into words. Can I feel both positive and negative things? Can I let it come and go is probably the biggest one. And that's one I've had to practice. I've had some grief in my life, and most recently my father passed away last February. And it's one of those things that it's not, you feel it big at the time, but then, football season starts and your dad calls you after the Steelers every win that's on national TV. All right, I get to feel that grief again. And that's when you're a feeler, if you can feel that and then let it go on and move on, because it's still a reality. It doesn't change anything to have these incredibly strong feelings. So that is stuffing versus sticking, and the goal is to feel your feelings. These things are all part of the noticer, and it's called the noticer because you don't want to react to these things. You want to notice them and then decide or respond to whatever that is. So I want to notice how you guys are, so I want to notice my outside world. So if you come up and you're talking, you're bringing up a topic, I should notice that you're doing this and engage in conversation if I'm working on my relational skills or I have relational skills. I should notice what's going on inside of me. Am I getting revved up? Is this music getting me hyped up? Am I watching a show that's, I don't know, they're all angry and it's affecting my body? So these are the things that are going on. And so strengthening that noticer and the concepts, these metaphors, for lack of a better term, noticer, discoverer, advisor, they make sense to young people. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of middle schoolers. Actually did a presentation over a couple of days with 800 middle schoolers in the Shawnee Mission District. And then I came back a week later to talk to the parents, and the counselors in the school were like, you know what, the young people are coming into our room and talking about their advisor and talking about their discoverer. Like, this language made sense to them. And so that's why I keep putting it out there for you guys. This is a way to talk about these things with your young person. So the noticer influences emotion regulation. So we talked about cognitive regulation. Now we're talking about emotion regulation. If you're unskilled at emotion regulation, very vulnerability to emotions, like they're very strong, and or lability, which means they're just flat. There could be anger outbursts, so it could be flatline and then an anger outburst. Steady negative emotional state, depression, angry all the time, shame, anxiety. Just had a young man through the group who literally was just like, for probably justifiable reasons historically, but was just angry all the time. That was the response they came in. And so when we finally, when he could tap into that and we could talk about what he was doing, he was protecting himself with anger from parents splitting up, some other things. That started this whole process of moving him into being able to regulate and notice that anger instead of just reacting from it all the time. All right, have deficits in positive. So if you're unskilled in emotion regulation, it is really hard to have things that are positive enough to shoot you up that ladder and make you really happy. All right, and so they just start having less and less happy things. And if there are less and less happy things, there's more and more negative, or it seems like. Skilled emotion regulation looks like the ability to be aware of and constructively handle both positive and challenging emotions. Experiences a range of positive and negative emotions in a safe context, demonstrates the skills to manage and express their emotions in effective ways, is able to notice the activity of his or her advisor in a given situation and not react. So again, thinking about the spectrum between, completely unskilled to kind of a master emotion regulator, and where does your young person fit on this? And where do we need to be focused on? Do they need to focus on actually feeling these feelings? Do they need to be able to describe them or put a label to them? And we're going to hit on some tools to hopefully help with that later on or today. This is an interesting, when we think about how we as conscious people use logic, all right? Makes sense. Everybody kind of learns logic. And let's go through this. And this is not something that most people actually teach their child, but it's just inferred by a young person on emotions. Okay, I hit, so young person, I do it too, but my 3-year-old hit somebody. Well, why'd you hit him? I don't know. All right, and then maybe I start putting words in their mouth. Well, it seems like you were angry. So you were angry, so you hit them. All right? Well, if they take the opposite of that, they understand it. If I'm not angry, I won't hit. All right, so we've made that connection already, angry and hit. All right? If I can stop myself from feeling angry, I won't hit. So this is the young person trying to control it by controlling the emotion. Anger is bad because it makes me do bad things. And then finally, if I feel anger, I have a problem. There's something wrong with me. All right? And then you can take that statement, there's something wrong with me, and put it right into the logic that I shared last week. Like, if there's something wrong with me, and I just keep rotating that through my advisor, I start believing there's something that I don't fit in, and why should people love me and like me? All right? Rarely do we hear the message that all feelings are okay. So it's okay to be angry. Right? We've got our young, again, I've got one who's adopted and had trauma, and the other one clearly has emotion regulation issues biologically, and they're in Taekwondo. And the one little guy just is like, he just kind of shut down, and the person working with him was just amazing, and talking with him and getting him to be like, I don't like losing. And that's a big deal in him. He does not like to lose. The trauma one, like survival is based on him winning. She just talked about yeah, it's okay not to like that and to be upset about losing, but you still stand back up and you do the next exercise and you don't take it out on others and you don't shut down. It was a really amazing interaction to get to this rare, that feeling was okay. And she even reinforced it after the lesson when we were talking, because I watched the whole thing. It was pretty impressive. But does this make sense? And I don't think any single one of you or any person I know actually teaches this to their young person. But because we're learning logic, we're using language, just to learn English language, you start having to understand different causes and what's connected. And this just kind of comes out of it. And especially if you're already predisposed to some of that negative advisor or rule setting, or like I have to follow this rule. Because that feels like an easy rule. If I'm not angry, I won't hit. Except for something is going to make you angry at some point in time. All right? So how do you help in these situations? I'm trying to give you at least a single tool to walk around or go home with on each of these. And one thing I've noticed with young people, and I actually gave essentially this tool to a counselor who tried it out for a while, is that young people aren't actually connecting their needs that they feel, like I want this, I need this, to emotion. So they have the emotion, but they don't know that it's actually connected to a need that we all have. All right, so there may be other lists. This is the list I use of the needs that we have as people. We have a need to be understood. That includes acceptance, belonging, the need to feel welcome, security, connection, the need to feel important, attention, gaining some self-worth, the need to feel important, the need to feel comfort, unconditional love, the need to celebrate, Having fun, having freedom, and they need to have purpose, personal identity, authenticity. And it's interesting, if any one of these are significantly, like I have probably had a young person in the program where one of these is so far off that that's what's caused the problem. Any one of them. So I can't say it's this one over that one, because the last one, if they don't feel like a purpose and nothing makes sense to them, they can be cutting and having suicidal ideation just as much as the young person who doesn't feel welcome or understood in any way, shape. All right, does this make sense as a basic list of needs that everyone has? All right, so if a young person, for whatever reason, they aren't getting these needs met, or they haven't found healthy ways, because if you don't have good relationship skills, it's hard to get some of these met with your peers. And quite frankly, peers are tough. Lunchrooms are tough. Their interactions are tough. And so they're not getting these needs. I mean, it's not like they got friends walking around going, hey, can I understand you better? It's just not a part of their life. And so these are challenging to get met. And so this is an activity to talk through, and I've included the whole activity in the online packet. You can go download. I just didn't print all the paper out. But you actually go through, and when I do this in group, I actually have the parents and the young person go through these needs and say, ways that this need has been met in my life. So I really felt understood in this conversation. Or I really feel like I belong to this, thespian group, since I'm standing on a stage. Ways this need has not been met, all right? I don't, you look back at Bries, doesn't feel like anyone understands how boring school is to her, all right? If nobody understands, it just generates anger. All right, so you go down and you would make the list, you'd help your young person, or they would make a list, and that's a great conversation right there. All right, and it also sets up, well, if you've had these ways to get this need met, why don't we get more of those options into your life? How do we get those needs met more often? And you go down the whole list. Then it turns into a fun little just conversation. If you put it all together, when yada yada, I got bullied, occurred, any of the events you might write down, my need for welcomeness, my need for being welcome was not met. And that led me to feel, all right, and you get in there and you can start matching those up. And so it's a complete exercise. It actually walks them through once you make a list, or a young person makes a list of ways they've gotten the need met and the ways they've not gotten it met. Then we ask them to look at 10 events in their life that they think made them who they are today. All right? It's really not like there's perfect answers, but like my father went into the ministry when I was 12 and moved me from one school where I had some really good things I thought were going to happen to another school. At the time, I would tell you that some of my needs weren't met, but then they met some other ones as we went forward. But I would say that event shaped who I am in my life, and so that would be one of the 10 that would be on my list. So really it doesn't matter how I think of 10 events. So my 13-year-olds can do it, and my 18-year-olds and my parents. You can come up with the 10 things, and then walk through this and start attaching them to what needs were met or not met, and then how to get more of that met in your life. So that one's in there. It leads to this notice or conversation. It really bolsters and connects, well, I'm feeling need, and pain is a need for something. Well, what is that need about? How do I connect it to actual actions and things that can happen in my world? All right, I want to put these together into the distress tolerance cycle and take a look at what happens with young people, all right? And so the cycle itself is designed to get through a difficult situation without making it worse. What's the point of that? Why would you bother? Why bother coping with painful feelings and urges? Pain is part of life and can't be avoided. Can't always be avoided. If you can't deal with your pain, you may act impulsively. When you act impulsively, you may end up hurting yourself, hurting someone else, and not getting what you want. All right. So, somebody cuts you off, you can, if you can't handle that pain of being cut off, you might, flip them off, which is an impulsive kind of act. Really doesn't get you back into your space and line, and might actually lead to a fight or somebody throwing, or in LA back in the day, road rage and shootings and stuff like that. I mean, stupid stuff. But that's a big example of how this process works. Why do we need to use the distress tolerance cycle? Why do we need to understand this and move through it? If we're going to ask a young person to try new skills, to work on that discoverer, create themselves all the time in lots of different situations, I guarantee you that's going to cause stress. Right now I'm a little stressed because I'm still trying to get technology to work, all right? It's a new thing in my life. And it's causing, get to go through my own distress tolerance. When we try through things, we experience various feelings and inner sensations, some of which are really uncomfortable, all right? These may include anxiety, fear of failure. Practicing the distress tolerance cycle creates a more flexible noticer, which helps you to take risks and try new things by being able to cope with the strong emotions. And confidence actually comes when you try new things, see if they work out, and learn what you're truly capable of. So self-esteem is not built on just telling somebody they're good or that they did something. Self-esteem is actually built on a young person believing they're capable of something. And every time they believe they're capable of something, so the less and less they do, the less and less esteem they have of themselves because they don't believe they're capable of things. So the cycle comes in when you have intense pain that can't be helped quickly. You want to act on your emotions, but it'll only make things worse. Emotion mind threatens to overwhelm you, and you still need to. So here's a situation to put that into. I'm overwhelmed by this algebra test in front of me. All right, I can't take an algebra test in emotion mind. So how do I get to taking that? You're overwhelmed, if demands must be met. Your arousal is extreme, which means your body's just amped up or charged up, but your problems can't be solved immediately. All right? So you have this page in there to work through this, this cycle with your young people. But when we do this, we talk about triggers and setting events. All right? So, and triggers are issues we're not totally rational about. All right? So this is, and these are real examples, but a young person has been traumatized by somebody. And literally somebody else just looks like that person. They know for a fact it's not that same person. And yet they're still triggered. It's still a trigger that sends them into distress. All right? And that could be smells, sounds, any kind of things. Enduring vulnerabilities. Again, so my 5-year-old who has emotion regulation, biological emotion regulation issues, it's not like that just goes away. That's not going to flatten out in his life. He's going to have to learn how to manage that as he moves forward. All right? Then you've got the coping control responses, and then the long-term consequences. This is, again, we do it all the time. This is just 2 groups of young people that have gone through and what they came up with. And I want, if you can think of anything else, but triggers for young people included worry was a trigger that might send them. And the question was, could this send you into a crisis in some way, shape, or form? DM sound, so Instant Messenger actually has a sound that comes up, and they had been bullied on Instant Messenger, so literally the DM dinging sound got them. School, trigger. Disagreement with values, so they don't, in that case, didn't agree with their parents' values. Overthinking things, mental hospitalization. Doubt, second guessing themselves all the time is a trigger. Loss of control, something going different. So expectations equal hope, and if it didn't go that way, that would be a trigger. Change, seeing others do anything, self-harm, all kinds of things. Their thoughts about themselves, their self-image would trigger them. Envy, jealousy, adult men, adults connected to abuser, and tools connected to the abuse. Serious injuries, social situations, somebody being in your face, hitting, yelling, important people getting sick, pressure to do well, yelling, loud rejection. Random calls, text, boys Snapchatting, boundaries, disrespect, moms, dads almost always make the list. Personal space or somebody in it, not having time to think, sounds, So in some cases, a young person, was traumatized. So somebody walking up the steps is a sound that triggers them. Being forced to talk, not being given emotional space. Songs like Wu-Tang has a song that was caused part of their trauma. Assuming something about me, so barging into my room, unexpected door opens, pills, being underestimated, media, church, anyone searching my phone. Can you see that list? So I give you this worksheet in there to think through it with your own young person. What are their triggers? What are their setting events? So then you move to the coping and control responses, all right? So in this case, the question is, if this happens, what do you do to cope with that situation? And here's the list that they put together. Control my eating, so either binge eating or not eating. Isolation, compulsive cleaning, excessive working out, irritability, shutting down, sleep, substances, drinking, eat ice cream, impulsive choices, video games, FaceTime with friends, rant negatively, not eat, overeat, binge purge, walk, lashing out, passive aggressiveness, isolate myself, gripping, scratching, lack of motivation, aggressiveness, watch, listen to things I enjoy, yell, scream, shutting down, ASMR videos, sex, drugs, drinking, reading fantasy, pulling hair, self-harm, cigs, vaping, not thinking, picking skin, eating skin, romance, anime. Realize, I just ask how they cope with it, all right? You get a few positive ones in there, and once in a while, I play music or I'm creative, but literally just asking the question of how they cope with their triggers and things ends up with this whole list of unhealthy behaviors. Because, they're like, well, can I say playing guitar? I'm like, yes, you can. I will write it up there. But 2 groups, that's the list I got. So the cycle that young people are going through, I'm trying to watch my time, is triggers, setting events. How do we cope with those? How do we control our environment because of these triggers? And then it leads to long-term consequences. Right? So if they repeat that cycle, this trigger, I use this coping mechanisms. And we all get into patterns. All right? Leads to long-term consequences, bodily harm, habit addictions, loss of motivation, guilt, feeling not enough, flunking, damaged relationships, actually making their mental health worse, unhealthy expectations of the real world, STDs, pregnant, loss of reproduction, worsening relationships, unmet goals, lack of reaching potential, addiction, eating disorder, serious injury, hospitalization, worsening depression, anxiety, obesity, diabetes, residential placements, jail. Does that cycle make sense to you guys? What can happen? Young people, they actually do a really good job of getting to what the long-term consequences of their behaviors are. Parents usually have an additional one that they go through. All right. That's kind of scary. So let's talk about what the distress tolerance cycle is. All right, so the distress tolerance cycle is, let's take a break. When I get triggered and I'm getting into a crisis stage, all right, take a break by focusing on something else for a while, reboot your mind, but it's not really a cycle if you don't get back to dealing with the issue. All right, I will tell you, young people are amazingly good at distracting themselves. Amazingly good at it. All right, they are not really good at getting back to and facing whatever the issue was they were dealing with. So getting that concept in there is really the most important thing, is that we get back. The take a break is to get back to dealing with the issues. So all of you guys have put it on your refrigerator. It's in the packet online. Those of you that are here got ones that are laminated, and you can use a white erase marker on it, and it erases very nicely. So you put this up on your fridge and be like, wow, you need to take a break right now. Pick one of these things and go do it for a little while, and then come back to the issue. All right? And so there's a list that includes distraction. It includes some things that are like mental vacations or improving the moment. But the goal is to go do something, read or watch something funny, and then get back to the skill. I want to go back here. This cycle works at every possible level. Again, I'm going to go back, and this is mainly because people cutting me off really makes me mad. So I use this as an example a lot. But if somebody cuts me off, I can then, it's a very minor thing, but at that point I can be like, I'm going to take a break right now. All right. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to notice that I'm getting angry and frustrated, but I'm not going to do anything. Because my natural reaction, if you cut me off, is to like tailgate you for a long time, just to be annoying, right? That's what I want to do. So if I take a break, and then I deal with the issue. So dealing with the issue in this case is I need to get them out of my sight. So I slow down and I change lanes and I get away from them. So at a very, very, and I'm going to admit, this very, very minor example, this cycle actually works. Take a break, reboot yourself, deal with the issue, and then move forward in your life, all right? The example I use in group is, I run a 5-week, 4 days a week, 3 hours a day intensive program that parents have to come in every Thursday and be a part of, all right? So at some point, life had gotten so challenging in their households, your households, whatever, that we needed to take a break from. And so in this case, they're taking a 5-week break from probably some other things they could be doing, including school. We have to work out with schools a lot. But we're taking a break at this scale. Why are we taking this break? We're taking this break to deal with the issues that are causing the ongoing problems. So on a huge scale, you can see that cycle even playing in that case. But you keep it very simple. Your question earlier about what would be the one thing I would do, to work on diffusion. This is the one thing if you can think about taking a break and then dealing with the issue. But always coming back to that dealing with the issue is really important. Does that cycle make sense to everybody? So then you get a couple of questions. One, I've tried to give you a list of things you can take a break. Oh, I want to hit on this real quick. So that list of 45 things is probably if you can tell that they need a break or they know they need a break. But if it gets to be more extreme, they've fallen way, way into emotional mind, you might have to use the TIPS skill, which is, intense temperature. So cold water, ice, even a hot washcloth sometimes would work. Intense exercise. So this is like, man, you just need to get some of that energy out. Go take a lap. Paced breathing. So working to really slow your breathing down, to slow your anxiety down. Progressive muscle relaxation. So that's TIP. And it is meant to deal with extreme emotional arousal. I'd say that list I gave you is probably not for extreme. It's for kind of day-to-day distress kind of things. But TIP is a DBT skill that's been tested. You can actually get like ice masks, like that you freeze. And okay, so I know a young person who was in a facility and she started getting, revved up in a family session and they're like, you got to go put on your ice mask for a while. And then you don't get out of this session. You have to come back to the session. You just have to calm down and then deal with the issue. You have on page, I'm hoping it kind of begs the question, how do we know if we need to take a break? So on page 3 in your binder or in your packets, how do I know I need to take a break? Well, if I'm not in wise mind, or am I in wise mind? How does your body feel? And this is a really good, again, a conversation. This is a tool to use with your young person. How does your body feel when you're in wise mind? How does it feel if you're not in wise mind? And go through that. What does that look like? Because if you're having intense body sensation, tight muscles, racing heart, probably a good time to take a break. Because it's not a good time to actually deal with a problem. What are your thoughts like? It goes the other way too. Are the people I'm interacting with in wise mind? All right. So if my parents are not in wise mind, it's not a time to deal with the issue, kind of thing. And so that worksheet helps you walk through. Between the two worksheets, you can put together your family's list of trigger setting off events. You can look at the coping and control responses. You can talk about the long-term consequences or costs of doing those, and then go through the take a break worksheet to find out what that looks like. And you try and do that when you're in a wise mind, because I would tell you, most young people have a hard time, continuing to step back and figure out before they move into one of their coping responses, if you go back to the chart. So the goal would be to get in between those triggers and coping responses, and that's where you want to take the break before you shift into that. They can't always tell as they're sliding down emotional mind. So when we do this with families, the best example ever. It happened the weekend. We talked about this on Thursday. The mom came back the next week and she's like, all right, she had a whole pile of homework and you could just see her body revving up and not wanting to do it. And she was about to go into all of these negative behavioral patterns. And so the mom said, hey, let's take a break and bake some cookies. The young person couldn't do it on their own. They were stuck in that, I've got to do this, I got to push through, and it was revving them up. Mom said, let's take a break. They took a break, they baked some cookies, the young lady got back. I don't know if she got it all done, but she got back to doing homework in that same day. So the parent, or from the outside, had to help them recognize when they needed to take a break and then deal with the issue. Give you a couple of tools here. So calm harm, if you're worried about self-harm, if the coping mechanism is self-harm, this is a great app. It's free. If you're struggling with anxiety or depression, there's free Clear Fear app and Move Mood app by the same company. It's really well researched and they're good apps. Lots of the young people have actually used Calm Harm and found it to be helpful. It allows them to put in things so when they're getting stressed out and they want to cut and you can't think of what would be a better take a break, it pops it up for you and you've kind of loaded it in there what would work for you. If you're really worried about suicidal ideation, the Got Your Back app helps them put in some people that they could immediately contact. You get in the app, you've got one-touch access to crisis centers and hotlines, helps you build a safety plan kind of thing if you're worried about suicidal ideation. So, I want to share one more poem with you that I think summates the distress tolerance cycle. It's called an autobiography in 5 short chapters. Chapter 1, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I'm hopeless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. Can't believe I am in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit, but my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. So, my hope is if you put all this together, the ability to unhook from your advisor, start recognizing your feelings, stopping that cycle by taking a break, is that young people would quit falling in the same hole, whatever that hole or crisis looks like for your family, and then figures out and discovers new paths and new ways to be. I'm going to put this in there. We're going to keep walking our way. This, again, was observe your thoughts and feelings, but the bold is a process. So if I breathe deeply and I slow down, that's even the take a break. Observe my thoughts and feelings. Can I notice what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what that is kind of moving me towards? Can I listen to my values and say, no, that's not the kind of person I want to be that's needing to use marijuana to calm down. I want to do this kind of thing. And then decide. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is a great, very simple breathe skill for rational minded. So you think of 5 things you can see. My person who designed this didn't get the numbers right, but 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell around you, and 1 thing you can taste. It's also just as simple to say, if they're really kind of getting edgy, it's like, can you see 5 blue things? Point out 5 blue things. All right, her shirt. All right, your mask. So it really brings you back to your senses and uses your, instead of getting stuck in your own head, you're having to use your senses to connect with the world. So that's breathe, observe your thoughts and feelings, listen to your values, is moving in the direction you want to move in, and then decide on actions and commit to do. All right, with this, my time is about up. This is what we do at my facility, and somebody had asked earlier, we do have individual counselors there, and you reach out to me, I'll connect or give you a list or see if I can find a referral for you. Have slots in our program. This is my amazing team. If you call us, Katie will be the one returning the call. Yes. Moving forward, next time we're going to talk about self-regulation, behavioral regulation, and we're going to do value clarification. And since it's not going to be probably a massive amount, there's a free gift if you come back for that one too. So the people here get a gift on that one. And then the final one, we'll be talking about building and improving relationships, or how to say no if that's a problem, deal with ongoing pain, and then building up change plans in people's lives. I think I've hit my time limit, but are there any just questions that have to do with what we just talked about? I thank you all for coming and finding the right door and joining us. So that is all I have. Thank you. And we will get this posted actually pretty quick.